Civil rights laws didn't stop C2E2 cancellation of Shane Davis, John Malin, and Ethan Van Sciver, but they should have. Hello, this is Robert Romano with Comicsgate.org. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the C2E2 cancellation. April 26th to April 28th was supposed to be Comicsgate going to C2E2 in Chicago, but unfortunately Shane Davis's table for 9 Lives Comics got canceled. At first, they said it was something to do with subletting the table, but then they shifted it off to a harassment complaint. And I think that this is obviously going to be a big problem, for guys like Ethan and John and Shane that want to go to conventions and be able to, promote Inglorious Rex and Godlike, Graveyard Shift, and Cyberfrog, and are unable to do so. And I think this is pretty sad in this day and age. But this is the situation. This is the world that we live in, as John Malin was saying on his stream. And unfortunately, civil rights laws don't protect social viewpoints and political viewpoints at the federal and some state levels. In this case, it would be Illinois laws that you would look at for public accommodations laws. They have, race, sex, religion, etc. are protected classes, but social viewpoints, political viewpoints, those are not generally protected under civil rights laws, to such an extent that my organization, with Trump supporters getting thrown out of restaurants and things like that, this has been going on for years. You learn about Comicsgate, you learn about people getting debanked like Martina Markota, and that there's a lot of discrimination against conservatives very broadly, basically political discrimination. But unfortunately, civil rights laws do not protect political viewpoints, but they should. To the extent that my organization, Americans for Limited Government, has spent years begging Congress, particularly Republicans in Congress, to pay attention to what we view as a serious need for reform of civil rights legislation to protect political viewpoints, and particularly with all the discrimination, that you see against Trump supporters, particularly, being thrown out of restaurants or bars and things like that. But first, I wanted to let you hear from John Malin and Shane Davis about, from their perspective, what happened and this email that they received. This will go on, I think, for a couple of minutes. So let's go full screen here, and we'll just hit play.
Okay. All right. All jokes aside, let's do it. Let's do the big announcement.
Big announcement, guys. Wow, you just tossed it back.
I can do it. I can do it. I don't know if you want to do it. I can do it.
I can do it. Or you can do it. It doesn't really matter. So, everybody knows we were lined up and going to C2E2. We did the CG triple threat and all that stuff. I got off. I had a phone call. For some reason, Reed wanted to get off record, and had a phone call with him. Some things were said.
What is Reed, for those that don't know?
No, Reed is the company that runs C2E2, New York Comic Con, Emerald City Comic Con, and maybe one other one.
Like the number 2, 3, maybe 4 top shows in the United States.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And to preface this, me and John, I really should have started with it. We basically went through every channel and every handler that we've gotten passed off to, and I went back and looked at emails, and we were kind of guided into filling out our paperwork the way we did, and we've basically done every single thing Reed's asked of us, and
dotted our I's, crossed our T's, said our prayers at night.
Yeah, may the Lord keep our soul to keep all that stuff, and all of a sudden there was like a sudden, we have to get on the phone. We have to get on the phone. And I was like, okay, this isn't good. So took a phone call with them, and they first tried to say that I basically did things wrong and broke the terms of service, which I said, no, you guys gave me badges, and John and Ethan and other people are going to get badges because the booth comes with like 10 badges. The exhibitor's booth.
Right. Ideally, it's Shane's booth, and we are his guests because they can only have one name on a booth. That's how it was explained to us, because initially it was Shane and I going in there, and it was going to be Secret Door and 9 Lives Comics on the booth, and they said, well, we can only have one. So I just said, Shane, put yours on there.
To be specific, the reason it could only be one is because they had to write one invoice. So that was how I look back. That's how we were guided into it just being consolidated into one LLC, which would have, John said, just use yours. It didn't really matter.
And that was because Shane already had the contact there. So Shane was already further in discussion than I was. So.
Yeah, it really didn't matter whose LLC it went to because we were both talking to them at the same time. It was just like, just use yours. So here we are now with a different person saying that I broke a rule, and I'm explaining to them, no, I didn't. They're just guests of the booth. And I'll be quite honest with everybody. Then the conversation switched to harassment, accusations of they have a no harassment clause, and they can't have people attending the con, of harassment and stuff like that. And that I would be getting a refund for the booth, and a letter would be following shortly. There was really not a lot else that could be said because the other part didn't stick, like we did everything they asked us to do.
Right. So while you were on the phone talking about that we had done something wrong, and when you went and challenged that, that's when they kind of flipped the whole conversation into a harassment clause on their code of conduct. Right.
It switched to that. So I don't hear anything back from them. Instead, the following day, I get an email telling us more stuff to do because they're excited for the con and stuff like that from another department. So I kind of respond back to all and said, yeah, can't wait. I'm thinking like maybe this was just a rogue employee stepping off an email and just wanting to have it out with me, because it just seemed like the dude was just kind of said what he said, pretty much what I said. There wasn't really much more said. So I get off a plane, and there in my email, Yancey's calling me, is a letter that they wrote out, making it official to us by a different person, not the person I talked to that was yelling at me on the phone. It's signed off by some other lady who I've never dealt with at all. They all have these titles that sound important, so I really don't know the pecking order or the tier of these people. I'm assuming she's kind of high up there though. So, and it basically said, and I sent a copy to John, and to be honest, I haven't really had a proper read through it. Like I've read through it only once on the computer screen. Everything else has been on my phone, and the document kind of skips around when I try to zoom in. But it basically was kind of in point the same as the letter, except when it got down to the harassment stuff, it got very specific with two people in point. That would be you and John, meaning John, and Ethan.
Right.
Saying that because on the phone I'd even pressed him like, who did they harass? Who and he just talked over me. So in the letter, again, they don't really emphasize who's been harassed. They actually just say harassment and then try to put in parentheses, race, gender, whatever. I don't know if they said religion. Maybe they said religion. They just went through like a whole list in parentheses of all these different harassment things, but never any instance of it. Not one type of notation. Nothing. Right.
Nothing
so
specific.
After talking to nothing specific at all.
I'm just going to tell people the line that they actually wrote, because they wrote the conduct of Mr. Sciver. They wrote Sciver, not Van Sciver. The conduct of Mr. Sciver and Mr. Malin, including but not limited to, quote, offensive verbal comments, unquote, in relation to, quote, race, color, national origin, gender identity, gender presentation, and sexual orientation, unquote, are indeed in violation of the code of conduct, therefore a breach of the C2E2 agreement order. And also they state that the code of conduct is not just for their show, it is for your entire life.
Yeah. So
it is all the time between the shows. At any time, if something bad happens to you, you say something out of line that is not politically aligned with what they believe politically, they can throw you out. And specifically, obviously the ones I latch onto are gender presentation. So basically, if you ever declare that you believe that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, C2E2, Reed, Expo can throw you out of the top shows in the industry like that. So just keep that in mind. That's the world we're not even that we're headed in. That's the world we live in right now. Like literally, we're literally in that world right now, that if you sit there and you just say, hey, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, it's something that is complete common sense, but it's not the politically correct verbiage of the modern day, because some wackadoo said so. So even though everybody agreed on this 10 years ago, now it is grounds to throw you out and to stop you from making a living and presenting your product to an audience.
So that's pretty much the clip I wanted to show, and lays out, it reads the email that we want to talk about as it relates to this cancellation at C2E2, which I find to be egregious, but not necessarily illegal per se, as it relates to civil rights laws, which include public accommodations. Now, Civil Rights Act, Title II is public accommodations, and includes things like exhibit halls, any motion picture house, theater, concert hall, sports arena, stadium, or other place of exhibition or entertainment, or any establishment. So this would be like, people going to a restaurant or something like that. You're not allowed to deny services, but on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. And that's under federal law. And this is longstanding. Civil Rights Act, 1964. And states passed several conforming acts themselves to the Civil Rights Act. This is the Illinois Human Rights Act. As an example, states that nothing in this act shall be construed as required. This is the employer part. But if the protected classes in Illinois are race, color, religion, sex, national origin, ancestry, age, order of protection status, marital status, physical or mental disability, military status, sexual orientation, pregnancy, or unfavorable discharge from military service. And then they say you can't, discriminate against employment, real estate transactions, access to financial credit, and the availability of public accommodations. Again, under Illinois law, that includes convention halls. So you could have an auditorium, a convention center, a lecture hall, or other place of public gathering that is considered a place of public accommodation. And then that would fall also under the Civil Rights Act. And you can see that the Illinois law actually has an expanded class of definitions that are things that are protected. But one of the two things that are not protected, social viewpoint, political viewpoint, which John Malin was articulating in his video, that, if you disagree about, gender transitioning or something like that, they can bar you from that. Well, under the statute, that's true. They can bar you under that. If you have a social viewpoint that C2E2 disagrees with, or a political viewpoint that C2E2 disagrees with, they can kick your ass out. And that's unfortunate. I think it's because this is just going to keep on happening. Again, my organization has been calling for Congress to do something about reforming the Civil Rights Act to include expanded definitions like social viewpoint, like political viewpoint, because of all the discrimination that we've been seeing in recent years. As an example, I think that you had, here's one, man in MAGA hat kicked out of New York City bar. And this is Newsweek. Is it legal to ask Donald Trump supporters to leave? Here's the guy, he gets kicked out of a bar. So why does this happen? It's a public accommodation, going to a bar, go to a restaurant, etc. But why is it okay? Why is it legal to kick this person out because he wore a MAGA hat? I mean, is that cool? Is that the kind of country you want to live in, where if you're a Republican, you support the Republican nominee? You're not allowed to do business. You're not allowed to go to a convention. You're not allowed to go to a bar. You're not allowed to go to a restaurant. I argue these are civil rights violations. Even if the law doesn't yet protect it, Congress has the power under the 14th Amendment to pass laws that enforce the provisions of the 14th Amendment, which includes equal protections of the law at places like public accommodations. That was eventually done under the Civil Rights Act. Unfortunately, that is not the case right now. It doesn't protect political viewpoints. It doesn't protect social viewpoints. And it doesn't, and other areas of, financial transactions. We've looked at this before. This was Stripe. Wall Street Journal, Stripe stops processing payments for Trump campaign website. This was after January 6th. So on January 10, 2021, because of January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol, after Donald Trump gave, former President Trump, he was still president at the time, he gives a speech at the National Mall. He says that, Congress should vote to basically change the outcome of the election, or to, withdraw the electors for 3 states. I think it was Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia, that there were challenges being heard. And he was trying to advocate that Congress vote in favor of his challenges. Now, the votes eventually failed, but there happened to be a riot that day at the Capitol. And as a result, everyone blamed Donald Trump. They said, oh, it was an insurrection or whatever. And then you have a political deplatforming from a financial payment processor, Stripe, that occurred. They went after Donald Trump. I say F Stripe. They really suck for doing that. But we've seen other examples of debanking before in Comicsgate. This was Chase Bank deplatforms conservative performance artist Martina Marcota in 2019, 2 weeks after Chase Bank announced it would no longer do business with Proud Boys chairman Enrique Tarrio. Conservative performance artist and rebel media personality Martina Marcota has become the latest conservative media figure to be targeted by the bank, which has made no secret of its support for liberal causes. See its decision to cut ties with the gun industry. So there's Martina. She eventually goes on to do Lady Alchemy, a graphic novel. I believe Von Klaus was also credited as a writer on that. Interview with Big League Politics, Marcota explained that the account that was shuttered had been linked to an Indiegogo campaign that Marcota had used to raise more than $34,000 for a graphic novel she had been working on, which made a decision to shut down the account more of a financial burden for her. And so this was an example of financial deplatforming that directly impacted Comicsgate. This was, in fact, how I discovered Comicsgate. I read Zero Hedge at the day job. As a VP for public policy, you look for headlines, you look for things that are interesting. It's like, oh, what's this debanking stuff? Like, you learn more about debanking, you hear about Martina's story, and then you learn about Comicsgate more broadly, that there was several incidences. The most famous, of course, was Kickstarter deplatform Jawbreakers falsely accusing Richard C. Meyer and John Malin of, quote, discrimination, subjugation, and intolerance towards marginalized groups. So I did this in 2021. Some people were saying, "Oh, we should go back to Kickstarter," and I'm like, "F Kickstarter! They're violating your civil rights. In this case, to access a crowdfunding platform. There aren't laws to protect creators who go onto a crowdfunding platform. It's not a public accommodation under civil rights law or anything like that. Any more so than Chase Bank has to keep Martina Marcota under federal law. They can discriminate against her for politics. They can discriminate against your boy Zach and John Malin for politics or social views. In this case, they say, oh, you're discriminating against people, marginalized groups, blah, blah, blah. And so these are the examples of deplatforming, of being kicked out of conventions. And then you get to, here's Fandom Pulse. Everyone check out fandompulse.com. This is from John Delarose. Former Marvel artist, Marvel Comics artist John Malin alleges C2E2 convention canceled him, Shane Davis, and Ethan Van Sciver over Nebulous offensive comments. And then this piece was from John Delarose. Do check that one out. John Delarose definitely knows about getting kicked out of conventions because he was kicked out of a convention, Worldcon, and they had to apologize, and they paid the piper to John Delarose in a settlement. Comic book creator and science fiction author John Delarose declared flawless victory in his lawsuit against San Francisco's science fiction conventions, aka Worldcon 76. Delarose, the author of Deus, Vault, Flying Sparks, Justified, and more, sued Worldcon back in April of 2018 for violating Civil Code Section 51 of the UNRRA Civil Rights Act, violation of Civil Code Section 51.5, violation of Civil Code 51.7, and violation of Civil Code Section 52.1, and defamation. On YouTube, Delarose explained his lawsuit. If you guys aren't aware of the situation, I've been targeted and harassed by SJWs in the science fiction since I came to the scene in 2016. They found out who I voted for on my Facebook wall, and I just started getting threats ever since that point. It was really ugly. I just got constant death threats, constant harassment. I couldn't just be left alone to make my work. And this translated over to people I never would have thought doing this. I mean, big names like John Scalzi, the head of SFWA at the time, Cat Rambo. They were all on this hate blog called File 770, just attacking me over and over again. He further elaborated. And then WorldCon, I announced I was going there, and I sent them an email saying, hey, I've gotten a lot of harassment from people, and I've gotten death threats and things like that. Do you have any additional security measures, things like that? And they never responded to me. And so I was really scared. Eventually, he gets banned from the convention, and then they have a lawsuit that they would have filed a motion for summary judgment. And then on June 4, 2021, they announced that they had settled with Delarose and issued a public apology from Kevin Roche, the chair of WorldCon 76 in San Jose. So I think the reason I wanted to show this is because he was suing under civil rights laws in the state of California, which are different from the civil rights laws in the state of Illinois, and as it relates to public accommodations. But this is definitely within the mains of civil rights laws. They have different classes of things that are protected when it comes to public accommodations. Again, in Illinois, it's race, color, religion, sex, national origin, ancestry, age, order of protection status, marital status, physical or mental disability, military status, sexual orientation, pregnancy, or unfavorable discharge from military service. And again, that'll impact employment discrimination or public accommodations discrimination, as we see here. Now, I also had a piece on Fandom Pulse. C2E2's oppressive code of conduct gives organizers carte blanche to target anyone. And I wanted to pull up the C2E2 code of conduct. We'll have to copy the link address here. I'm using Web Archive because it's a little faster, and there won't be any cookies. But here's the C2E2 safety, security, and wellness information policies. This is the so-called code of conduct that supposedly Ethan Van Sciver and John Malin had violated to the extent that Shane Davis, 9 Lives Comics, was going to get their booth removed. And here's what it says. RX strives to create and maintain an environment where all peoples are treated with dignity, decency, and respect. As such, we expect every participant in any RX event in any manner whatsoever, including but not limited to all exhibitors, attendees, speakers, guests, professionals, media, staff members, workers, contractors, vendors, security, or anyone else who participates in any way to behave appropriately throughout the year in accordance with this code of conduct. Please be aware of and respect the personal boundaries. And then here's the stuff where you can't have, this was the offensive verbal comments from the letter. That part is quoted in relation to, and then here's the list that was in the letter that John Malin read: race, color, national origin, gender, gender identity, gender presentation, sexual orientation, and so forth. These are supposedly their offensive comments by Ethan Van Sciver or John Malin somewhere. You know where it didn't happen though? At any RX event at all, because they haven't been to an RX event, because the convention doesn't take place until April 26th to April 28th. It's not even April yet. So they were, Shane Davis on his own YouTube channel was saying that this is like Minority Report, where they were being, hit with something that they hadn't even done yet. It's like, oh, there's going to be harassment or something like that. There's no actual harassment to speak of in this case. So that's I think the real key point that occurred at an RX event, particularly, which is what the code of conduct governs. It says that you have to behave appropriate throughout the year. I think that's the clause they're kind of leaning on to say, oh, that covers everything. That covers, as John Malin said, that covers your entire life. Must cover social media or something like that. Except it doesn't say that. It says to behave appropriate throughout the year in accordance with the code of conduct, every participant in any RX event. So this is, RX puts on a lot of events, C2E2, they do New York Comic Con. So Chad, if there was an incident at one of the venues, you're an attendee or you're a participant, you're an exhibitor or whatever, something happens, there's whatever, you get into a fight or something, let's say. And they say, oh, you're not allowed to go to any more RX events throughout the rest of the year. This is how they're able to enforce that, by saying that at any event throughout the year, if you get in trouble, we have a right to bar you, except Shane Davis, John Malin, Ethan Van Sciver, they haven't even done the event yet. So how could they have violated the code of conduct? So that's the thrust of my piece here on Fandom Pulse. As reported earlier, the C2E2 convention, which will be held April 26th to April 28th, has canceled an exhibitor appearance by Inglorious Rex creator Shane Davis, Godlike and Graveyard Shift creator John Malin, and Cyberfrog creator Ethan Van Sciver. As more details emerge, with the creators speaking out, the cancellation is based off of so-called offensive verbal comments, supposedly in violation of the C2E2 code of conduct. This code of conduct is more than oppressive and should make all C2E2 attendees wary. Davis, Malin, and Van Sciver had crowdfunded the tabling fees for the C2E2 event, in part via the profits from a successful Indiegogo campaign. That was the CG triple threat variants. The biggest characters in indie comics joined forces: Cyberfrog, Godlike, and Glorious Rex. They raised more than $54,000. And then in a statement on March 30th, don't worry, guys, you're still going to get your books. Yancy Lin, Davis's wife, and Inglorious Rex inker, said supporters who had backed the campaign would still be receiving their variant books. Quote, the CG triple threat campaign was for books instead of dividing up the profits to go into our respective pockets, like how all crowdfunding works. We rolled it into a booth instead. Backers who bought the books will still get their books, which is what they paid for. Now, if you were on your way to C2E2, that's a different matter. I think John Malin and Shane Davis say that they're still going to go there to meet fans in some capacity. You'll have to follow their social media to get updates there. Speaking on a March 30 YouTube live stream, Davis, whose table 9 Live Comics at the World Class Convention was canceled, stated, quote, in the letter again, they don't really emphasize who's been harassed. They actually just say harassment and then try to put in parentheses, race, gender, whatever. And then quoting from the letter, he says, this is the quote from the letter: the conduct of Mr. Van Sciver and Mr. Malin, including but not limited to offensive verbal comments in relation to race, color, national origin, gender identity, gender presentation, and sexual orientation, are indeed a violation of the code of conduct. And he says, again, they state the code of conduct is not just for their show, it's for your entire life. And so I challenge that part of it. I think that very specifically the clause says that every participant in any RX event, including all exhibitors, attendees, speakers, guest professionals, media staff members, etc., to behave appropriate throughout the year at an RX event. That's what it applies to. The full, we went through the full clause already. And then the code of conduct, it further instructs attendees to seek out security or event staff at any event if they are harassed. Quote, please note that anyone can report harassment to event staff, security at any time. If someone's behavior has made you uncomfortable, or if you witness harassment happening to somebody else, you should immediately contact event staff security. If necessary, security or event staff will contact local law enforcement, provide escort, offer a safe place, or otherwise assist with those experiencing harassment. So they're saying, if you see you're at C2E2 or New York Comic Con or whatever, any one of their events, and you see like harassment or something, let the staff know, because then they can intervene. So again, this is explicitly stating that the harassment is supposed to take place at the convention. Convention hasn't even happened yet, guys. So how can they be in trouble? How can they have already violated it and get this email saying you're not allowed to exhibit here? Subletting aside, let's focus on harassment. Let's focus on these so-called code of conduct violations, because I think that they are incredibly relevant to a question about whether John Malin, Shane Davis, and Ethan Van Sciver were discriminated against. Of course they were discriminated against for their social and political viewpoints, just as John Malin said they were. In that context, speaking to any RX event appears to be designed to govern attendees, guests, and exhibitors of exhibition conventions throughout the year, so that if an incident occurred in any RX event earlier in the year, it can lead to expulsion from all other events occurring that year. There's just one problem. John Malin and Ethan Van Sciver, who were cited in the letter to Davis, have not participated in any Read exhibition events as exhibitors or guests in the past year, or even in the past several years. Comicsgate hasn't really been doing conventions too much. It's actually kind of a cause for debate and controversy within the movement itself about whether they should do more conventions. Well, maybe the answer is maybe not. Maybe it's difficult to do conventions because you can get discriminated against. You could plan months ahead of time. You could raise money to do the convention, and they can still pull the rug out from under you at the very last minute, even if they were promoting it and saying, "Oh, we're looking forward to you coming," and you've paid. The worst part is they had paid. In fact, neither Malin nor Van Sciver were expelled from, nor even accused of harassment at any convention appearances or Read events in the past year, or even years past. So there's not an allegation that they had violated the code of conduct at these events. So if you weren't violating the code of conduct at the events, code of conduct doesn't say that they can expel you. But that's what the C2E2 is saying now. I think that's bullshit. And that they've retroactively expanded the application of the code of conduct to social media, or, just what your political and social viewpoints are as you express them on social media. So I say that just leave social media. But nowhere in the code of conduct does it state anywhere about conduct by attendees or exhibitors on social media, including YouTube, X, or anything else. Now, Davis, Malin, and Van Sciver, they obviously have popular YouTube channels and X accounts. And the code of conduct does not even mention the words social media. And I will show you right here. Here, we're going to go find, Control F. We're going to type in social media. Oh, look at that. No social media. Well, what about Twitter? Maybe they mentioned Twitter. Nope. They mention their own Facebook account. They mention their own Twitter account, but they don't mention the words social media because the code of conduct doesn't apply to social media. Now, whether there's been incidents where C2E2 or the RX conventions have banned people for comments that they made on social media, I'll leave that for somebody else to kind of put forward. But this was updated last, I believe, September 28th, 2023. And it doesn't cover social media. It's not in there. And so your conduct throughout the year, such as it is, it impacts any RX event you're attending. Your conduct at these events is what they're supposed to be governing. And we know that because they're talking about like physical assault or battery at a convention, threats made at a convention, non-consensual photography at a convention, etc. Bathroom policing at a convention. None of this stuff happens on social media per se, and it's not what they're governing because they can't govern your conduct just by agreeing to go to the convention. Oh yeah, we own your entire life. Better be nice, in public when you go to the supermarket, on social media. Be nice to your cats. Like they can't say any of that stuff because that's not what it's supposed to apply to. So I think that these code of conduct, such as it was applied to John Malin, Shane Davis, and Ethan Van Sciver, I think is very discriminatory. I think it is a violation of civil rights. Unfortunately, Illinois law doesn't protect their civil rights of social and political viewpoints. When you have incidents, for example, like someone wearing a MAGA cap getting thrown out of a bar, as much as we think that's bullshit and that's wrong, that unfortunately the laws of the land do not protect social and political viewpoints. And even if they should, I think they should. Instead of the code of conduct only appears to apply to actions that occur while participating in the event, which has not yet happened. Also, they say if the clause is invoked, it comes with no refund. Quote, if a person engages in behavior in violation of this code of conduct at any time, RX will take prompt action in any form deemed appropriate, including expulsion from the event with no refund. However, in the live stream, Shane Davis had stated that, in fact, they were going to refund him for the cost of the table. So if C2E2 is so confident that Shane Davis, John Malin, and Ethan Van Sciver had violated the code of conduct for an event they had not even attended yet, and they claim that if you do that, you don't get a right to a refund, why are they offering to return the check for the tabling costs? I say that's inconsistent. I don't know if that's like an admission of guilt or anything, but whatever. It's inconsistent. They say they're entitled to keep their money, and they're saying, oh, we'll send you back the money. Don't worry about it. Why are they hoping that Shane Davis doesn't pursue this, or John Malin? I mean, not that I don't think it would matter. I'm not sure there's much of a case you can build. Maybe like breach of contract or something. I don't know. Obviously check with real attorneys, not internet attorneys. Apologies to John Malin. We don't want to but we should talk about the public policy. We've been, again, begging Congress to fix the Civil Rights Act for years for the repeated acts of discrimination that we're seeing all over the place, whether it's in public accommodations or financial services, on crowdfunding platforms, etc. And, get people getting kicked out of conventions. I learn about a lot of this stuff. I learned about DEI and ESG because of Comicsgate. I learned about debanking largely because of Comicsgate. You hear about these things as you're, pursuing public policy issues, and you got to pay attention to a whole bevy of things. But, certain things, have really come into focus thanks to Comicsgate. And, because Ethan had said that there was probably, public financing or subsidies or regulatory incentives or whatever that were incentivizing kind of what you see in the social side, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And almost certainly there was. Labor Department regulations, absolutely. You have the Thrift Savings Plan, Federal Employee Retirement Plan, that it makes investments into ESG investments, which include DEI. As well as the labor regulations, which incentivize, the defined benefit and defined contribution plans under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act to, make ESG, DEI types of investments, which are discriminatory. They violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That one's explicit because they're saying we're going to only give jobs to minorities, and we're going to give fewer jobs to whites. And so that actually is a violation. But as far as public accommodations law goes, we've got a long ways to go if we want to prevent discrimination like we're seeing, with John Delarose at WorldCon, like we're seeing with Ethan and John and Shane at the C2E2 convention. We've been begging Republicans in Congress particularly to look at this, but they're not really interested in it. I don't know if it has something to do with the Barry Goldwater campaign of, 1964, when Republicans were basically, the Republican nominee was opposed to the Civil Rights Act. And so maybe ever since then, Republicans haven't had much to say about civil rights. Now, they got crushed in that election by a landslide, so maybe they should have paid attention to it. But leaving that aside, you just don't hear Republicans in Congress saying we need to reform the Civil Rights Act to prevent discrimination of conservatives at public accommodations. And they complain about debanking. They'll do oversight hearings about debanking and other issues about censorship on social media. But when push comes to shove, are we going to pass any laws? Are we going to propose any laws that are going to actually stop this stuff from happening? And so far, no. The answer is no. So we have to kind of fend for ourselves on whether it's on social media or going to conventions, and just kind of watch out. I think there was one. I did want to go back to the piece, very briefly here, because I didn't get to the end of it. We might as well get to the end of it. So I say this is cancel culture. In this case, Davis, Malin, and Van Sciver were not even given an opportunity to participate in one of the Reed Exhibition Center events this year, let alone be held accountable for their actions that have not yet even occurred. Instead, they were preemptively expelled from C2E2 before the event even happened for harassment that could not have possibly occurred. This is cancel culture, not for any actual harassment at a convention, but because of non-specific wrongthink by Shane Davis, John Malin, and Ethan Van Sciver that they could only speculate might have occurred on social media. Now, speaking on March 30, Jan Zelin stated that the C2E2 planning had begun as early as July of 2023. They paid their deposit in August 2023. They put another deposit down in January 2024. So even before there was crowdfunding, or about the time they were doing crowdfunding, there was ample opportunity for C2E2 to say, hey, you can't come here. We don't like you. Instead, they wait till you raise all the money and make all the plans and invite all your fans, and then they pull the rug out from under you. Thanks, guys. Lynn stated that throughout the process, they were in constant communication with the event's organizers and were even profiled on C2E2's website before being removed. And we have the screenshot for that here. Booth 519, presenting comic creators Ethan Van Sciver, John Malin, and Shane Davis. Well, I guess they were aware that there was going to be 3 creators there. Between the 3 of them, they have a collective comic creating and publication experience of 70 years working at DC Comics, Marvel Entertainment, just to name a few. Ethan Van Sciver has worked on Green Lantern, Rebirth, Cyberfrog, Superman, Batman, Flash Rebirth, and many more titles. John Malin has worked on Cable, Graveyard Shift, Godlike, Thunderbolt, and many more titles. Shane Davis has worked on Superman, Earth 1, Inglorious Rex, Starlight Cats, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, and many more titles. And there was the CG Triple Threat variants. They were going to, be signing these at the convention. It was a great opportunity, I think, for these three creators, Ethan, John, and Shane, to, really showcase what they've been doing with crowdfunding, which is a miracle. Crowdfunding saved these, particularly Ethan's career. But when Zach, brought John Malin on to do Jawbreakers, we've just been seeing cancellation after cancellation after cancellation of comic creators. And so it's like, are we going to carry this kind of art form forward? Are we allowed to carry this art form forward? Can we even sell books? Can these guys sell books at conventions? Are we even allowed to do commerce? Can we even get a bank account? What about after the convention? Can we go to a bar, and maybe wear a MAGA hat? Can we use payment processors? All this shit should be illegal. Republicans in Congress, they've completely failed you. Going to be completely honest, completely failed you. They had defunds to get rid of censorship this year. They didn't get rid of the censorship. They collapsed on the omnibus spending bill. They pulled all of the riders out that would have stopped CISA, DHS, the FBI, Justice Department, the Department of Defense, and the Department of State from doing censorship with social media. Though all those things were going to be defunded. The House actually passed legislation. So they did a good job in that regard. They actually passed bills that included the things that we need. They defunded ESG. They got rid of DEI at the Department of Education and otherwise throughout the federal government. Great prohibitions on the use of funds. Lots of stuff, but they failed. They didn't draw a line in the sand and sit down with the Democrats and say, we're not leaving this room until we agree we are not going to use federal agencies to censor one another for having different views on foreign policy or whatever. And they couldn't even get that done. So right now, can you safely use Kickstarter? Maybe not. Can you use Indiegogo without being shadow banned? Maybe not. Can you use Stripe without getting deplatformed? Better watch out. Maybe not. Can you use Chase Bank? Maybe not. You might not be able to go to a bar, and you might not be able to go to C2E2. Maybe you can go to Worldcon because California maybe has better civil rights protections, but not every state is going to have the same laws. Illinois certainly does not. That's the situation we have. Davis commented that his family's business was canceled for violations that had not even occurred yet, saying, quote, it's like a Minority Report, like premeditated crimes. He's right. Speaking on his live stream, John Malin criticized the provision about gender presentation, saying that if you have wrong think about transgender stuff, you could be thrown out of the top shows in the industry just like that, and for not doing politically correct verbiage of modern day because some wackadoo said so. He added, so just keep in mind, that's the world we're not even headed into. That's the world we live in right now. And I say John Malin is right. This is the thought police. At this point, they should just give us all armbands, create segregated economic zones, and be done with the illusion of freedom. And if you're a small business trying to speak out against it, watch out. This is Robert Romano with Comicsgate.org and the Fandom Pulse. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications. I think we might have a comment or two, so I'll just go to the comments real quick. It won't take long because there's only one. 7 of 9. Thanks for listening, 7 of 9. What's your take on the subletting accusation? Given the I don't know, like, would that have been impossible to deal with? Was that an irreconcilable difference? Were they willing to pay more to have another space? Go from whatever 20 by 20 to 10 by 10 or whatever the accommodations were going to be. It sounded like that was pretty easy to fix if that was the only problem. But but that wasn't the only problem, because then they cited harassment, the code of conduct, and for viewpoints about gender presentation or something like that, or race or sex or whatever. So they're saying that, your social viewpoints constitute harassment, therefore we can kick you out. And I say, well, it's interesting about the subletting stuff that they put that in there. they put that, you know, I mean, I played the part of the video where Shane was explaining what happened with the subletting, but that then they shifted. Shane said, "You led us into doing the, you know, taking it all out under 9 Lives Comics." I showed you the screenshot from the C2E2 website that they were promoting the fact that they were going to have 3 creators there. That required manual approval to put that on the website. So it's interesting, the subletting stuff. If that's all they had done, you know, maybe I'm not making this video right now. They shifted to harassment, and they said that they had violated the code of conduct for an event that they hadn't even attended. I say that's discriminatory, but it also fits a pattern. And so that's, you know, why I'm making the video today. Let's see here. We have G3 Toff My Grass. Thanks for listening. Good review of the situation so far. Happy Resurrection Day. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Everyone, I want you to all have a happy Easter. This is Robert Romano with comicsgate.org. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good evening.